Welcome to the Bronx Veterans Oral History and Archival Initiative. Today is Wednesday, December 20th, 2023. I am Pastor Crespo Jr., the research librarian for the Bronx County Historical Society. Today I am joined by Deahna C. Penn, a vocational specialist and a U.S. Army combat veteran who served in Tikrit, Iraq. Welcome, Deahna.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you here. Would you like to say something about yourself? Introduce yourself?
Uh, yeah. I just turned 39 years old in October. I served a few years in the Army, initially in the Army Reserves, before I got activated to Iraq. I served a year in Iraq, and that was pretty much it for me as far as the military. And years after serving in Iraq, I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I worked with veterans in the capacity of helping them vocationally. I helped them with training. I helped them find work. I helped them, sort of get connected in like a whole health type of way, where they would be focusing on their health and employment as part of their treatment plan. So I would also be working with their social workers, their psychiatrists, as a part of this treatment plan. That employment was going to help make them better, more productive. It was going to help their confidence, and statistics speak to that. Especially with veterans, that employment gives people a sense of purpose. So that's how that started out, and I became a community employment coordinator in the New York Harbor VA. For a while, I was working by myself, and then I passed the torch over to my colleague, Eliza Mercedes. So this was in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. So yeah, that was the whole New York Harbor. I did that for about a little under 10 years. So it was a good thing to do. I felt very noble in doing it. I went to school while I worked, and that was challenging, but I did that for a little bit. And in 2019, I decided to pursue my own personal interests in the arts. So I started commissioning oil paintings and acrylic paintings, and I began to do commercial voiceover. So that's primarily what I focus on now, in addition to helping veterans in the community, particularly in the Bronx and New York City. So that's giving back is something that gives me purpose.
All right. And
Yeah.
we'll see if we can touch on each of those, as we go on, just a little more in depth,
Yeah.
But thank you. I appreciate that overview. We like to start out all our oral histories by asking, questions about, your family history, background, and tell us where your parents come from, and talk about each of them.
Well, my mother was a teenage mother. So she was very young when she had me. Most of the caretaking went to my grandmother until my mother was of a certain age, and we lived in New Jersey. They're from Connecticut. So I have a lot of family in Connecticut. My mother and father still live in New Jersey. They are separated. They've been separated for years, divorced. My father remarried. I have a 11 and 13-year-old brother and sister. They're a little blessing. I don't spend too much time, relating with my mother. We don't have the best of relationships. It just is what it is, over the years. That's just how it's become. But I do try to go to New Jersey and see my brother and sister, and my father and my stepmother and my cousins. And, New Jersey it's a part of me. So I spent the majority of my childhood in New Jersey, some in Connecticut, but majority in New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, with that said, where in New Jersey? I mean, where were you born,
I was
and where'd you
born.
grow up?
I was born in Passaic County, and I grew up in. I grew up a little bit in Central Jersey, but also in South Jersey initially when I was younger. I want to say Monmouth Junction, Princeton Junction counties, where there's a lot of farmland and, you can hit deer in the middle of the night because there's no lights, that type of thing. And then we moved to Somerset. That's where I went to high school until I spent my last year in high school in New London, Connecticut, where my other family grew up. I spent that time with my grandmother and then I came to New York. But Somerset, New Jersey, that's where my little brother, I have a 30-year-old brother. He grew up there. We grew up together, and we spent a lot of time there. So I have a lot of memories there. My father still lives there, so I can go back and show my girlfriend this is where I grew up.
Right.
That's always nice. Not the same house, but I can always go visit that house because I know where it is. It's down the street. So I get a little nostalgic about it.
Cool. And so what type of music did your parents listen to at home?
My parents, because my parents were young, they listened to a lot of house music, club music. They went out to clubs sometimes, which I kind of thought was kind of cool, because I had cool parents, But we listened to Prince, Earth, Wind and Fire, Tina Marie. Oh my goodness, so many things, and I guess that's part of the reason why I have a wide range of music interests. My music interests are constantly growing. If I find I get a little bored with what's going on, like right now, I'll go back to the past and
Right.
do some searching and listen to different sounds and things. So that's where I'm at now. I'm like going back to the past, like the 40s and the 60s, and just listening to different sounds where there was actual instruments and
Right.
talented vocalists. So
But you grew up your teenage years in the 90s, right?
yeah 90s. I graduated in 2002, so yeah, 98.
Okay.
I was in high school.
Oh, hey, so tell us. I mean, I know it's still New Jersey, but talk to us about the different schools you went through. K through 12, and your experiences.
Well,
and anything you'd like to share.
Well, since living in New York, I realized that public school is very different in New York than it is in New Jersey. I think I'd probably be a little different if I gone to a public school in New York City. Not bad or good, but I don't know, I'd be a little bit different. I don't know if I'd lived in New York if I grown up in New York. That was kind of part of it for me. I always wanted to live in New York. I had some family in Parkchester, but I've always been inspired by New York. Like, this is always where I wanted to live.
You think you had a better experience in New Jersey public school system, or?
I do, because especially, I mean, depending on the county and the area, how much money people put into the school systems,
Right.
That's how great the school is going to be. I mean, I remember there was one school I went to in Union County that was just like, we would have Domino's pizza every Thursday. And that was a regular thing. You know how you have pizza on Fridays?
Right.
We didn't have pizza every Friday, but every Thursday, for whatever reason, they would have Domino's pizza. I thought that was odd, but I thought it was cool at the same time. I didn't really understand it, until I became an adult. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's what's going on. Okay, so those things I kind of took for granted until I became older. You know, I didn't realize that those things were privileges. You know, to be able to, you know, as school wasn't, I was always a loner type of kid, you know, so I was shy, and, you know, school wasn't the greatest place for me as somebody who wasn't sociable, you know. But in hindsight, when you look at it as an evolved adult, you're like, wow, you know, that was a good opportunity. You know, I don't know if I would have that opportunity. I see kids competing for uh, what do you call it? The charter schools here, you know, and that's like a regular public school in New Jersey, a charter school, you know. So it's like there's a there's a there's a there's a significant difference, you know.
Right.
Um,
Oh, I definitely get it.
Trick or treating.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite holidays,
Okay.
Halloween, because my mother would take us to like the more affluent neighborhoods, and we would go, and she would park our car, and we would go. By that time, my brother was like in a stroller, kind of, you know, and it's still cold, but she would, you know, make an effort, and I get some really good stuff.
I hear you.
Money and, you know, normal size chocolate bars, like, you know, those are things, you know, you don't think about until you're an adult. Like, oh yeah, you know, these kids are going trick or treating. You know, it's not the same.
Right.
So
I agree. I agree. So you talking about your childhood, a lot of kids here in the Bronx. I'm from Manhattan, but there were kids games that were really, really important to us, especially in the urban setting. What kind of kids games did you enjoy?
So I like to play. Okay, so as far as like kids games, like in the schoolyard and, you know, on the concrete and stuff, the neighborhood concrete, maybe like Foursquare.
What's that?
It's like it's one big square, and there's 4 squares within that square, and each person gets a square, and you gotta kind of hit the ball in someone else's square, and if they don't hit it, if it's out of bounds, then something happens. I don't even remember what happens, but it was a fun game to play because you're testing your reflexes, and then at the same time, sometimes we would correspond words, like different things with it. You had to say different names or something like that, or it's things that started with a certain letter, something like that. So you had to concentrate and then test your reflexes, type of thing. So that was cool. Okay. But I liked the playground.
Was it like a Spalding ball, a small handball,
no,
or a larger ball?
It was like a kickball.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like that big rubbery type of ball.
Got it.
Yeah.
And can you talk to us about the meals that you enjoyed in
growing up?
Growing up, yeah.
Well, I gotta hand it to my mother because she worked. Both my mother and father worked, and for the most part, she would cook us meals 3 to 5 times a week. My dad would cook every so often, but she would really make an effort, and I'd be upset when she didn't cook. I'd get used to it.
Right.
So I would sit in the kitchen and talk to her and do my homework at the table, and I didn't really pay too much attention to what she was doing, but I enjoyed that as a mother-daughter type of time, or just being with my parent. I enjoyed that because she was always busy, and as soon as she got home, she would get right in the kitchen. So that'd be my time to talk about school, or whatever was going on, and
And the place you grew up, was that an urban setting?
No,
was it
it's a
you grew up in a house or
rural.
apartment?
There were times where we lived in townhouses, but for the after a while, we lived in Somerset, and that's where we bought our house. And that's where my dad lives now, in Somerset. So there was always grass or something like that around. If it was like a townhouse, there was it was like a development, like kind of like an apartment complex type of thing. And there were other kids around, that would have a bus stop. The bus would come and go, pick me up. I had to take the bus to school because it was far.
Right.
So I always had to take a school bus until we moved in that house in Somerset, and I had to walk to school because my school was closer. So that kind of sucked.
Now, when did you join the U.S. Army, and what was the motivation? Why?
Oh boy. I quite honestly, I was running away from problems. I was running away from issues that eventually caught up with me when I came home. But I was just trying to get out and just leave and just go. And I really didn't care where, and I knew that the military would afford me that opportunity where I can just be and grow as an adult away from. I wanted to be independent. I didn't want to depend on my parents, and I wanted to be independent. That was important to me.
How old were you?
I was 18. I was 18. I just turned 18.
Did you go to a recruiting station? Or...
I did.
Okay. Talk to us about that experience.
So I was staying at a friend's house at that time. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. There was some disarray between my mother and I, and I didn't want to depend on my father. I didn't want to go back and live with him, and it was just like, you know what, this is my opportunity to go and do what I want to do. I don't want to be a burden and live in my friend's house, so this is what I'm going to do. And somehow we drove. I don't know where the destination was, but there was a recruiting office there, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go in there. What have I got to lose? I'm just going to go see. And I was fearless, and I just went in there, and there's a waiting period, and you're like, what am I doing? Oh, I'm going to have to wait anyway. I got to wait for her. So, okay. And that was that, and the rest is history.
What year was that?
That was I want to say that was at the end of 2002. Okay. Yeah, so I was out of high school No, that was the beginning of 2003 by the time I entered. So,
Got it.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to basic training, and can you talk to us a little bit about how basic training was and your experiences there?
Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I was administrative. So I went there for basic training and for AIT. Just stayed there. And AIT was only about a month.
Yeah, and for everyone else, AIT is Advanced Initial Training.
Right.
It's the vocational
training. Yeah, the training for your, what your job is going to be in the military.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No. So, I just thought it was fun. I just, I really didn't take it seriously. I've always been a clown. Always got in trouble in school for being a clown. This was going to be no different. So there was a group of us, we just had a lot of fun. And I told myself in the beginning of basic training, never wanted to run a day in my life. I avoided it all throughout gym class. Running, cardio was never my thing. But it had to be that thing because you had to run 2 miles to complete basic training. I was like, oh shit, I can't even run 1 mile. So that first mile they made us run, I'm like throwing up. I'm like, I'm going to do it though. I'm going to complete this. I'm going to do this because they didn't tell us we had to do 2 miles at that time. But I'm just like thinking like, I got to do this. I got to do this. I'm looking back at making fun of people who aren't doing it. And I'm like, who am I if I don't do it? So I got to do this, and that's how it was. I thought it was fun. We would get yelled at, anytime I didn't do anything, didn't do what I was supposed to do. I would beat your face, soldier. So I had to beat my face and do push-ups. That would give me an opportunity to relax in the evening, as opposed to doing push-ups with a lot of people were trying to do. Mm-hmm. So, I didn't mind beating my face, getting down on the ground and doing push-ups,
Any certain characters or individuals that stick out from your basic training experience? Did you have like a buddy? I guess there was a buddy system, right, in the new army?
Yeah, we had a couple, but I don't think it was just one buddy throughout the whole time because I remember having different buddies. You know, just anytime you went somewhere separate, you had to have someone else with you in the bathroom. But I I had a good friend. She ended up going. She was in the National Guard, so she was in basic training to be in the National Guard, which she got activated a couple months before I did.
Mm.
So I ended up seeing her in Iraq too. It was like a uh, bittersweet reunion, you know.
Right.
And There were all types of characters. I mean, I was 18 and there were people from Puerto Rico who barely spoke English. You know, I thought that was kind of cute. You know, one of them was my best friend's, and she was in her 30s, and I remember saying, "You were just so strong, like, you know, just I'm doing this for my daughter." And I just thought that was the most incredible thing, because I can't imagine trying to do that now, you know.
Right, right.
Um, and Yeah, so there was someone else older than her. There were a couple of other women older than her in there, and I was just like, I think we called them grandma. No. Yeah. Everybody had some sort of nickname, you know, but I think I was just Penn, you know. I wasn't, you know, I like to laugh, so
Right.
that's what got me through that, you know.
Got it.
Laughter and jokes and camaraderie, and that's what got me through Iraq. Laughter and jokes and camaraderie. So
Now you say you were Fort Jackson, South Carolina, administrative. What's the MOS for that? The military
at
occupation.
that time in the beginning, because it changed a couple of times, so at that time I believe it was 42 Lima and then 42 Alpha. And then when I got assigned to my reserve unit, I was in a chemical unit in Middlesex County, New Jersey. So I was a chemical specialist. So that was, let's say, like 72 something. I couldn't tell you. But so I was a chemical administrative specialist in the headquarters.
Okay. And you went to both basic and your MOS training at the same location in Fort Jackson.
Right.
But
Just a hop, skip, and jump away. Yeah.
but those were two different worlds though. Tell us about the differences between it being a basic training and going through AIT. What were the differences?
Well,
And
AIT was a little bit more relaxed, you know. Wasn't The expectation wasn't that you didn't know what you were doing, you know. It's just a little bit more relaxed. Like, you're gonna be going off into your duty station soon, you know, and this is not how we don't run things this way, but this is how you need to behave in the military. So it was more of like a formality. These are the things you need to do. This is how you need to move and walk and address people, type of thing. But basic training was more intense, you know. It was more of what you can't do and hurry up and wait, you know, that type of
right,
thing.
right,
It was more intense,
got it.
you know.
So you signed up as a U.S. Army reservist. So after
Yes.
AIT, you
After
went
AIT, I went to
back
my
home.
right. I went back home.
Talk to us about that experience.
So back home was New York and New Jersey. At that time, I was working in New York City and living in New Jersey, and you know, between my mom and dad's house, and then, you know, being in the reserves all the way down in Middlesex County, New Jersey. So I had, after a few years, I wasn't happy with it. You know, I wasn't happy with the reserves. I felt like it was like a kind of like a half-assed army. If that, you know, like it wasn't the real army, you know, like 1 week in a month, and sometimes, dare I say, sometimes I would hide out, you know, because there was just so little for me to do. Um and that was the worst, you know. It was really the worst, and I didn't really feel good about how I was being treated at that unit, you know. And so my uncle was in the army in Connecticut. You know, he was a staff sergeant. He'd been in the army for a while. And I talked to him about it. You know, I said, I don't know what to do. I'm not really happy, you know, and I don't know what the consequences would be for me leaving. You know, I just thought I'd run that by you and see what, you know. So we talked about it. And after that conversation, I knew that I wanted to leave. So going back to my reserve unit and trying to approach my chain of command, I found out that I was activated to Iraq.
Okay. Before we get into that, what was the your reserve unit?
My reserve unit was a chemical unit. They would be dispatched if there was chemical warfare going on.
What was the name of it?
And what? 448 was the unit in Iraq, but the unit in I can't tell you the number, but it was a chemical unit.
What year did you get activated to deploy to you said Kuwait?
Iraq.
Iraq.
2004.
Okay. Talk to us about
So that was
that unit.
2004. Yeah.
And it was the 448th Chemical Company?
448th Adjutant General Unit.
Got it.
That we went to it with Iraq. That was that was based from Shoreham, Long Island. And we wore the Liberty badge.
How'd you travel there? Was it a commercial flight or was it
travel
military?
To Iraq?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it was like a big commercial type of airplane. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
One of those contract flights.
Yeah.
And where'd you land in Iraq? And
we landed in Kuwait first. Well, before that, we went to like Germany or something like that. We had to stop and fuel, or we had to sit and wait, hurry up and wait some more. But I was shipped out of Fort Benning. So before that, I came out of Fort Benning and did my training, because you got to do training again before you go over there.
What kind of training?
It's like kind of like basic and AIT put together.
All right.
So I was thrown in there. Some of them were infantry guys. I remember this one guy. He was a friend of mine. I would tell him he looked like G.I. Joe. I said, you remind me of this G.I. Joe doll I had when I was a kid. So, but he was in infantry. There was a couple of other guys. There was some other people who were in IRR, Inactive Ready Reserve, because they were out of shape to be in the military. I don't know how you would get called to active duty in Iraq if you're out of shape, but that was the case. They were calling people out of inactive ready, and some of them were in my unit. We were a wild bunch, and we did at least 5 months of training. It was cold. By that time it was winter. We all had to retrain to be postal workers. That was our job.
Okay.
So we all had to retrain for about 5 weeks or so. Then there was like this additional training that I had for a week, combat lifesaver.
Got it. I
So
remember that.
yeah, the first day you stick an IV in one another. That was just like, oh God, But that was kind of cool. So we had the postal training. We had the regular, I don't know what you call it, hazardous training, the training to be in Iraq, that training.
Got it.
I don't know what that's called. War zone combat training maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
But we had to re-qualify with our weapons. That it took me a while to re-qualify. I'm a little embarrassed to say. We had all different types of training. It wasn't fun, but it was a refresher that was necessary.
Got it.
In the winter of Fort Benning, Georgia. It was cold. It was really cold.
Got it. Your time in Fort Benning's over. You get back on a plane.
We're headed to Kuwait, but first we stop in Germany. And we stay there for a little bit, for hours. We stay there for hours, maybe a day or two. I don't know. I don't even remember. But we stay there for a while, get back on the plane. We stop in Kuwait for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
It's like we process in, and it's the same reverse process that we go through coming out.
Got it.
You gotta stop at Kuwait on your way out, and then Ireland or Germany or wherever,
Got it. Where in Kuwait? Camp Arif John?
A couple of places. I I think one place was called Liberty or something like that. But it was everything was pretty safe there. You know, they've already been established. The United States has control over that domain, so there was no threat there. You know, but it was like a processing point. You know,
Right.
yeah. But we had to stay there, so there was a lot of transitioning points where we had to stay in tents. You know, just constantly living out of your bag.
Got it.
And sleeping on a cot. So
you didn't get released or get to enjoy the community in Kuwait at all? Just stayed on base.
stayed on base.
Got it.
Stayed on base.
Cool. And now you're done with all your preparation and in process in
Right.
Kuwait.
Right.
And
Now we
that's
have
the
to go.
big deal.
We gotta go relieve our unit, the unit that we're filling in for.
Where'd you land in Iraq?
Tikrit. I want to say Tikrit. That's like the central part, where Saddam grew up.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Talk to us. What unit did you go to there? And
So that was we were the 448th Adjutant General Unit, and we relieved the postal units that were all stationed there. The warehouses where the mail comes in, the front office where people go and send packages and things like that. I think there's probably about a week, maybe a little bit longer, that overlaps when we relieve them.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're on our own when we take over, and it's hot. You know, by that time, winter is kind of passing. You know, this is January, February. We're getting into spring, so during the day it's hot. At night it's very cold.
Okay. How long were you there? Tell us about your day-to-day experiences, life, the meals, working out, the gym, your job.
Yeah. So I spent a year there. That was a very interesting year. The first half of it was very difficult for me. After that first half, I kind of just settled in. There weren't many people that I trusted, so I had a couple of people who I considered, you know, like my really good friends. We lived together for the most part.
What were your living conditions like? Did you
Okay.
live in a hard side tent?
There
And
were
hard
some
side, I mean a building.
some buildings. There were some buildings. At some point, we lived in a building that we kind of took over, if you want to call it a building. You know, there's sand. So much sand got in there, like it's just ridiculous. But we shared. I think like 3 of us split a room. We had like little twin beds. You know, you can section off your own little area with a sheet or something like that. You got a couple lockers that you can put your clothes and your belongings and your weapon in, and that's pretty much it. You got your own designated little area. Or there were times where we had trailers. The trailers weren't that big. It's probably like the size of this room and maybe a little bit smaller. We cut it in half, and 2 of us were in there. One person would get one side, the other person would get the other. And you'd still sleep in those twin beds. They weren't really comfortable. You know, sometimes I would go and switch out mattresses, you know, where I knew they were stored, and you know, just swap out stuff, you know, where I knew where the storage was, and you know, put 2 mattresses on, you know, just whatever I could try to, you know,
trying to better that day-to-day.
Yeah, like makeshift stuff, you know. There were a lot of different makeshift things, but the bathrooms were separate.
All right, tell us about that.
It was not fun. I'm used to not having to go outside to use the bathroom, and that's all it was. You know, you'd be lucky if you went inside of a trailer that had running water, which you weren't allowed to drink, you know, but you could still flush a toilet. For the most part, you had to rely on a porta potty, and God hope they clean it, you know, before the sun comes, because the sun's going to start baking down on it, and it's going to smell ripe. And hopefully there's tissue in there, but if not, we walk around with baby wipes and sanitizer. in our pockets, in our cargo pockets.
Got it. Where'd you eat your meals?
We had chow halls. Chow halls would serve good food for the most part. You know, they had a little section where they served like the daily, whatever was on that menu for that lunch, breakfast, dinner. Then, you know, but if you didn't make it there, you could also go to the PX and buy like different ramen. We had so much ramen. We would get ramen shipped in from like kids or family members. Like we get care packages, tons of care packages filled with ramen. I'm just so sick of ramen. You would think I wouldn't be able to eat it now, but every once in a while, you know. But so much ramen, so much ramen. So if you didn't have the chow hall, you'd have that. Whatever you bought at the store, or you can microwave. Then you'd have like these fast food places, you know, but it didn't taste the same. You know, we had a KFC and Burger King and Subways. The meat wasn't really the same.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little different.
Okay. Did you have? I mean, were there like you had breakfast, lunch, and dinner? But did you have like was the chow hall open? You know, sometimes we had midnight meals available.
Well, I can't say that because I feel like in some places it was, because I do remember eating late some places when it was dark. But the chow hall would only be open certain times. So if you didn't go within that window for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner, then, you know, you were kind of asked out. So I would have a stock of stuff, you know, and make sure that I could either refrigerate or microwave or whatever I needed. What was I going to say? But yeah, that was the chow hall. So we had I forgot what I was going to say.
You'll remember.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, chow halls, right? The mess halls or cafeterias.
Yes.
Right. Usually in the States, you know, standard, nothing to, you know.
You got to clear your weapon. About. You got to clear you wait in line, first of all, you know, so you either get there in the beginning or the end. If you get there in the end, you might not, I don't know what you'll get, you know. Mm-hmm. So unless you go to the stir fry aisle, you know, they have this area where they make you stir fry or whatever, but you can only eat with so much stir fry all the time.
Right.
So you gotta wait in line, clear your weapon. You gotta be fully dressed because, you know, you'll have an officer or somebody trying to tell you what's wrong with your uniform or what you can't do. So you gotta be fully dressed and just be, you know, you just you know, you just gotta, like, it's like it's very disciplined, you know. You just gotta make sure you're on your P's and Q's, you know, because you don't know who's going to be in the chow hall, put it that way, you know, and everybody's from so many different areas, you don't know everybody, you know, so you know who's going to approach you, you don't know who you're going to see. So that was the chow hall. See, there was that expectation that you had to be on your P's and Q's in the chow hall.
Got it. Did now you know, I don't know the situation in Tikrit. Was there a base, or did you? And if there was a base, did you get to go off base?
Because
to the community?
My work schedule was so weird. Like I worked evenings. I worked in the warehouse most of the time. You know, warehouse. Whenever they would get planes of mail, it would come in the afternoon, and we were working throughout the evening. I preferred that, you know, I could listen to music, you know, I didn't have to wear my whole uniform, you know, it was just like a peaceful different type of work versus the front office, you know, you got to deal with people all the time and, you know, and you got to be up early. It's a different type of schedule. So it just depends. Sometimes I did that, but for the most part, I liked working with the mail, the actual mail that came in. And that schedule. So it was difficult to eat on that schedule. And it was difficult to do things like go out, you know, you're getting up later in the afternoon, or early in the afternoon, and you're kind of starting your day. So you don't really get to see much, you know, unless you're waking up. So unless I had like an appointment or something like that, or I needed to go shopping or something, that's when I would go out during the day. And it was very hot during the day.
Still on base, not allowed to leave.
On base, yeah. Not allowed to leave off base, especially when I went to Mosul. There was some time where I left Tikrit and did the same thing in a different area, kind of to help another unit. They needed help. So there were a few.
Mosul is northern Iraq.
Northern Iraq, next to Turkey. So there were some of us who went up there. You know, I was like, yeah, I'll go. But it was a different. I hurt myself, and we weren't allowed to like. I hurt myself because there was no light. There was not allowed to have any like street light, no type of nothing like that. So it's pitch black, and I got caught in the Constantine wire, trying to walk from my trailer when I initially got there to the bathroom trailer, and I had to be taken to the hospital, but it was late, so there really wasn't much they could do. So that's just like an example of, you know, when you could go out and, you know, type of thing. I digress.
Now, you weren't allowed to leave base, but did you have any experience working with Iraqis, either in
Yes.
Tikrit or in Mosul? Talk to us about your interactions with the Iraqi people.
So in Tikrit, and I filmed some of it. In Tikrit, we had guard duty. We would have some Iraqis come on base and do, I don't know if you'd call it construction, but maintenance. So we'd guard them while they did some renovations in these really dilapidated buildings. And I got a chance to develop a rapport with them. You know, at that time I smoked cigars. And I had swapped a cigar for a cigarette one of the Iraqis had, and he took pictures with my Kevlar, my glasses, and a cigar, and you know, we kind of, you know, I mean, it happens, and you're developing a rapport with individuals that you spend a lot of time with, and you know, at a certain point, you don't really see them as a threat, you know, and you're just trying to go about your work day while they're trying to go about their work day, and that's all it was, you know. But I didn't feel, you know, violently threatened by them, you know. I was just doing a job, just watching them do their work. But it gave me an opportunity to interact with you know, locals. And
any interaction? I'm assuming that these maintenance personnel were all men.
yes.
Any interaction with Iraqi women?
No.
Now, you're coming close to the end of your year in Iraq. Tell us about how your redeployment and your departure from Iraq, and where'd you go?
I was so leaving Iraq. You mean like getting ready to leave? So, like I said, there's that 2-week grace period where you have the new people coming in, and you kind of fill them in on what their job is and what they need to do for those 2 weeks. And you're just thinking, God, that you're going home. Because when they're there, that means you're gone, you know. As long as they're there, you can leave. You're relieved. So, you know, they're like fresh meat. They're new, and we're like, you know, teasing them, you know, and just poking fun, like, telling them what to expect and things like that, you know, just messing with them. But we're just really happy to go. You know, really happy to go, but at the same time, you know, you're nervous because you don't know what to expect. You know, we're already sending some of our stuff home. Like, I've sent footlockers of stuff that I acquired, that I bought offline, that I bought there, to my dad's house. They're like this big, like at least 3 of them, full of stuff. You know, so you're sending stuff home. You don't know what to expect. You know, that's my consensus. You know, you really don't, you know, so there's a nervousness there. What am I going to do? What's going to happen? You know, what is to be expected of me? What am I supposed to do, you know, when I get back? So, you know, and then there's that celebratory feeling where you feel like you're supposed to celebrate, you know. So there's just so much going on.
Okay, now your aircraft, it flew. Where did you come back in to the U.S.?
We came back in Fort Benning.
Okay.
We came back in Fort Benning, Georgia. That's like a blur, because I was just so ready to get out. And I think I stayed there for a little bit. I did a little bit of traveling with my friend who I was in Iraq with. We hung out before I came back to New Jersey. I flew back to Newark because my dad lives in Jersey, so I flew back to Newark. And my friend picked me up, This was like weeks after, my friend picked me up, and it was nice, it was a nice home welcoming, homecoming, and it was a culture shock. Coming back to the States, you just want to eat regular food. You want to eat.
Okay, and we left off with you coming back from, redeploying back to the United States from Tikrit, Iraq.
Yeah.
And your friend picked you up at the airport.
Yeah.
What'd you first do when your friend picked you up? Where'd you go? Family?
We went to my dad's house. He picked me up and took me to my dad's house. And then we went back to his house in Newark. And then I actually ended up taking over his apartment.
Your dad's apartment or your friend's?
No, my friend's apartment in downtown Newark. And,
Okay. And so what'd you do? Would you go back to work at what?
I did not go back to work. I spent a lot of that time having fun and partying, probably not taking life too seriously, because I hadn't at that time understood that I had developed PTSD. So I was in the beginning of that, while not even understanding, what was beginning to happen. But I was focused on going back to the arts. I was focused on modeling. I was focused on image consulting and personal shopping and being a stylist, that type of thing. So I was developing a portfolio. That was where my head was. But like I said, I really also wasn't taking life very seriously at that time. It wasn't until maybe a couple of years after, where things started to unfold and I needed to seek help. And my grandmother helped me a lot with that. So I went to the VA. I eventually was diagnosed with PTSD. Spent quite a bit of time in therapy, rehabilitation, all types of things, really just understanding what was going on in my mind and what I needed to do to get back on track, because the way she saw it, I wasn't who she knew me to be, So that was important, getting myself together. And I spent a few years getting myself together. Everybody was like, don't go back to work. Don't go jump back to work. He said, I'm bored. I'm restless. I need to feel productive. I need to do something. So I went back to work.
What'd you do?
I was a human resource consultant for this Japanese temp agency that's affiliated with Goodwill. But they pretty much started their own thing in downtown in Midtown Manhattan. I helped screen people, interview people for different positions that we had available, set them up with whatever clients that we had, to give them work, whatever positions were available. I did a little bit of sales, but at that time I was not comfortable with myself enough to do sales. So I stayed in the office. I helped with payroll. I learned some accounting. So that was my role there. And I tried to go back to school for fashion merchandising, but it just, things just weren't right. I wanted to go back to work, but God had other plans. So that's what I did when I came back. And then I took some time off again. I started developing my artistic skills and my outlets and communicating artistically and just being able to express myself, and understand the world, and my place in it. That took some time. And I'm grateful for my grandmother for being patient with me and supporting me and holding my hand through that. So once I felt confident enough, I applied to the VA, and it was only supposed to be a 4-year term. This was like a national initiative for veterans who had kind of been through challenges, to be able to help other veterans do the same. So that was what that project was about. It was also to help homeless veterans. Yeah, there was a big emphasis on homeless veterans. So they felt like if we could get this pool of veterans nationally, all around, we train them, we do this. So I was, in a sense, retrained, um, and that's where I started to develop my interest in social work. And my supervisor, who was my she was my mentor at that time. I had two mentors, actually. I can't say that. Um, Bill Bookstaver was one of them. He worked for the state. He's the one who helped me get that job. Um, and he was a veteran, and he advocated a lot for me. And then my supervisor, she was very compassionate. You would have thought that she was a veteran, but she just, her husband was a veteran. Her dad was a veteran. Like she understood, and I learned a lot. I learned so much from her, and I was just grateful to be working with her. And we developed a great rapport. So 4 years after, I got promoted to community employment coordinator, and I did that for a few more years, and I think my interest just started to change, I didn't want the same thing. I didn't want the same things out of life that I wanted 4 years ago. And that kind of scared me,
Mm-hmm.
because this was a great life that I had, at the VA. This is, it's a great position, great opportunity, just so many different things that were just great about it. Why would you want to leave, But my spirit was a little, wanted to do something else, and I think I was getting burnt out from school. At that time I was in an accelerated master's program at Fordham.
Okay.
And I did internship and everything. I did my internship at the New York Foundling. That was a family clinic. That was challenging. But I didn't know that I wanted the same thing that I wanted years before. My goals started to change. What I wanted out of life started to change. I just got out of a long relationship. Just different things at that time were changing for me. I went to Peru
Wow.
for 2 weeks on a retreat, and that just solidified. I'm on the fence about work and school and where I want to go in life, and that solidified, and it scared me. Like, you have this comfortable life, where all you have to do is just follow this path, but for whatever reason, you're not really, content with that. There's something else that you want, and it's starting to show in your work. I didn't want that. I didn't want my work ethic to go down, so in 2019, I took that opportunity to resign and pursue my artistic interests. Yeah.
Now, you said you attended Fordham University.
Yes, sir.
You moved to the Bronx. Where do you live in the Bronx? And talk to us about your neighborhood.
In 2011, I moved to 165 East 205th Street. That's right down the street. I've been there since that long. And I lived there with my girlfriend. We lived there for quite some time with our dog. I'm going to school at Fordham, the main campus, but I'm going in the evening. So I'm doing that for a couple of years, and then I switched to Lincoln campus on 59th Street in Manhattan. That was a little bit more comfortable, especially in the evening. It's dark.
Still living in the Bronx?
Still living in the Bronx. I have not moved. I'm still living there today. So, I haven't lived. I don't know that I've lived someplace so long in my adulthood. This is really
What's the name of the neighborhood? Like Williamsbridge,
I want to
Norwood.
say Norwood.
Norwood?
wouldn't say Norwood. Sometimes they call it the Bedford Park area, but it's in between. You know, it's Norwood. It's still Norwood. I like to say it's Norwood.
Got it. Tell us about your neighborhood. You know, I mean, you come out of your apartment. You know, you walk out onto the streets. Tell us about the sights, the sounds, the smells.
The smells.
The community
what
makeup.
I like best about my neighborhood is that Moshulu Park is right there. Then you've got Oval Park right here, but Moshulu Parkway is right there. You know, it connects you to Van Cortlandt Park, and it connects you to what's the other park? Bronx Park,
down toward the Botanical Gardens.
Yeah. Botanical Gardens. So all of this nature, I love nature, you know, and you know, someone with my complexities, you know, I need nature, you know, I really do. And not only do I need it, but I feel like my spirit thrives off of it, you know. And it's just an ebb and flow of goodness. So being so close to so much greenery, and you know, all I gotta do is poke my head out, I see that. But if I want to hop downtown, I can poke my head out and there's the Grand Concourse, and I just hop on the D or the 4. You know, I like that. You know, parking is not great. I'm gonna admit, parking is not great, but it's not the worst. But I like the fact that I can just hop on the train and go downtown. Or if I want, we can drive up to Westchester, wherever. You know, I like that. You know, and I don't know that I would feel that way living in Brooklyn. I've lived in Harlem. You know, I live 117th in Frederick Douglass. That was the apartment that I got after I came back from Iraq. So once I took over my friend's apartment in downtown Newark, I moved with one of my exes in that apartment in Harlem. We stayed there for a couple years. So.
And 2011 is when you moved to here, the Bronx.
In the Bronx, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now you talked about going to school for social services, and working with veterans worked with you on reintegrating you. Tell us about your work with the community and with veterans. You know, and why is that important?
Well, that all started with my employment at the VA. Outreach was a very important part of the job description. We would need to spend 70% of our job out in the field. You know, so that means I shouldn't be sitting behind the desk, you know, but maybe a couple times a week to do admin stuff. You know, that's it. But we're going out there, we're making connections with employers and community stakeholders to see what types of opportunities are out there for veterans, you know, and in doing this, you meet so many different types of, I would come home with resources that were not useful in the position, you know, like I can't do anything with it for veterans, you know, but I want to hold on to it for something else, you know, so that's just an abundance of different network connections, you know. I like being connected to, you know, different community partners, you know, just the Bronx workforce, Manhattan workforce, the Chamber of Commerce, you know, the library, you know, a YMCA, just different things that were advantageous for veterans, you know. And the thing about doing that was that I'd be focused on one specific veteran every time I went out and do that, but I'd come back with resources for other veterans, you know. So yeah, I developed a niche for public speaking. You know, sometimes I would hold groups on employment, being a healthy worker in employment, you know, dealing with those challenges, how to apply for government jobs, you know, just different things. And you know, I enjoyed it. So when I did leave the VA, I did miss that. And so I realized that I feel most purposeful when I am serving. And you know, I realized that during COVID, you know, especially, um, I need to volunteer in some sort of capacity. I need to serve. Um, I need to give back. That's really important in my heart, my spirit, to give back, you know, because not only is it helping me, you know, I say it's selfish, but it's obviously helping others. You know what I mean? Like it's a win-win situation, you know. So I have to do it, in whatever capacity. It's not just veterans, you know. Of course, I like to service veterans. I feel like I'll always be servicing veterans.
So, Deanna, you have a
Yes, sir.
relative who is a Medal of Honor recipient. Could you tell us his name and a little bit about the Medal of Honor and
Yes.
what you and your grandmother are doing?
So, I really should give credit to my grandmother for the most part for doing so much with my uncle. His name is Cornelius Herod Charlton, and he died posthumously in Korea um, in I want to say 1950, um, and because of his service and his bravery, um, and the way that he died in his sacrifice. There have been many memorials dedicated to him. One particular is on 164th Street in the Bronx. It's it was later renamed Charlton Thompson Garden, initially Charlton Garden, but Charlton Thompson after another Korean Medal of Honor recipient who died from the Bronx, PFC Thompson. So there have been a number of monuments and things named after him, from West Virginia, where he grew up, to New York City. You know, there's a naval ship named after him. I believe that's docked in San Diego. Although sometimes they come here on the East Coast. I think it was in Philadelphia a couple of years ago. There's just so much um, that he and veterans like him have done. And right now we're trying to get Marcy Place street named after him, Sergeant Cornelius Charlton Way, uh, to commemorate him. You know, what better way to keep his victory alive, you know, than to commemorate one of the Bronx's own, and that was the street that he grew up in. So that's what we're in the middle of doing now. It's taking time. You know, won't hear anything about it until next year, but yeah.
Now, when the way I understand is when he first passed away, he
Yeah.
wasn't given the full honors of a Medal of Honor recipient.
You
Can
know,
you talk to us about that?
well, being a man of color, and this being, well, he was in a segregated army. He was in he was one of the last Buffalo Soldiers. And a Buffalo Soldier was a black man who served in the army. It was a separate segregated army. And I think that the army hasn't served desegregated since the Revolutionary War. So after that, you know, after Korea, I believe Truman, um, what's the terminology I'm looking for?
Integrated the military?
Yes, thank you. He reintegrated it. So he served as one of the last segregated soldiers. And at that time, he wasn't allowed to be buried in Arlington. So he wasn't buried in Arlington. He was buried in a few different places until, I want to say, in 2010, 2004, something, somewhere around there. My 2010, yes, my grandmother helped him get reburied in Arlington. So that was a pretty big deal. And then from there, you know, she's just been kind of helping out to get his name known, you know, and the things that he's done for his country. And so we're in the process of developing a non-for-profit, a 501c19, in memoriam for him and other veterans. So it'll be a veterans organization.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great that you and your grandmother are. Now, your grandmother is Zenobia Penn. Where's she living now? And she's doing all this work?
She lives in Laplace, Louisiana.
Okay.
She's from Connecticut. She's lived in New York, but she lives in Louisiana. And yes, she has been doing this from Louisiana. Yeah, she's been, I mean, her dad served in World War II. So our whole family, you know, we're just a bunch of veterans, you know, and I didn't realize how important this being a veteran and being a part of that legacy was until when I came back from Iraq, you know, quite honestly, you know, and I was able to understand, you know, what that meant, what that sacrifice meant, you know. So I'm just, you know, I'm just overjoyed being involved with this endeavor with my uncle Cornelius Charlton, you know, and being able to help other veterans, especially in the Bronx, you know, where I've just, it's my home, you know.
Where is Cornelius H. Charlton originally from?
He was born in West Virginia. He was born in West Virginia. His father was a coal miner, an Irish coal miner. His mother was Native American and Black. They decided to be a part of the Great Migration and move north to the Bronx, where they would be able to be treated like human beings, you know, and better opportunities for their children and their children's children, which I'm very grateful to be considered a Yankee now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the Bronx was where he lived. He went to high school, and he lived on Marcy's place, and he decided he wanted to serve. I believe he was in an engineering unit, and he asked to be assigned to an infantry unit.
Wow.
Yeah. 21 when he died. So, you know, that gets me thinking, like, you know, I spent my 21st birthday in Iraq, you know. So it's just, there's parallels there, you know, and I feel a distinct closeness to my uncle. I feel proud. I feel very proud.
Wow. And is there anything else you'd like to talk about your military or veteran, you know, career or status that we didn't speak about?
No. But, you know, I used to have this love-hate relationship with being a veteran. You know, in the beginning of being a veteran, you know, because I didn't understand, well, why me? Why do I have to go through this? Or why did I live through this? You know, but it is what it is. It's a part of me. You know, serving in the military is a part of me. It's a part of my destiny. You know, I wouldn't be the same without it. I'm grateful for the opportunities that have come out of it. You know, because it's just as much as there's been bad that's come from it, you know, or pain that I felt from it, there's been so many other good things. The glass is also half full, you know. So I'm just excited to continue to evolve and to help other veterans evolve through whatever process they're going through, you know, and to be a better person and a better asset to their community. Because I believe that, you know, the things that they've taught us, you know, that aren't things that they teach civilians in everyday life, you know, and it's that things like integrity, you know, just those things become a part of you, and they become a part of your children as you teach your children, and you know, it's just a part of who we are.
Oh wow. You know, I want to, you know, a lot of times you hear this as a veteran, right? But I say it sincerely and from my heart, you know, and here at the Bronx County Historical Society, we want to thank you for your service. Definitely want to thank, you know, your relative, you know, Sergeant Charlton, for his service, and all the vets. And you come from a military family. Thank you for everything you guys have done. But we like to end this oral history the same way, regardless of the different projects we have, with one question.
What's that?
And it's, what does the Bronx mean to you?
The Bronx means unity, love, community, future. Just to name a few words, you know, I see a different type of future for the Bronx. Maybe it's something that I want. That's why I see it, but I see progress, evolution, and history, and that's why I think it's so important to know where the Bronx has been, so that you won't forget when you see how beautiful it becomes.
Thank you, Deahna.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you.